Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump announcing a trade framework with China as a deal is pending approval. How much tariffs he wants to impose and what's the White House warning to anti-ICE protests popping up in major cities. Protests in downtown Los Angeles lead to looting, arrests, and now a curfew. Mayor Karen Bass says the city is now under emergency orders. Tech billionaire Elon Musk said he regrets recent posts about President Trump, saying they went too far. So where does their relationship stand now? A federal appeals court in New York heard arguments today in President Trump's bid to erase his criminal conviction. President Trump says he's getting less confident that a nuclear deal with Iran will be reached. Meanwhile, another shooting is reported near an aid distribution center in the Gaza Strip. And Austria is dealing with the aftermath of what appears to be the deadliest attack since the Second World War. What we know about the gunman of yesterday's shooting and how the U.S. is responding.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Tensions remain high in downtown Los Angeles after several nights of protests. Mayor Karen Bass has issued a curfew in response to the unrest and destruction. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more from Los Angeles.
We're here in downtown Los Angeles near First and San Pedro, where several businesses were vandalized or looted Monday after protests escalated. From nail salons to liquor stores, many buildings are now boarded up, and in response, Mayor Karen Bass has issued an emergency curfew to handle the situation in the area.
I wanted to let the city know that I have declared a local emergency and issued a curfew for downtown Los Angeles to stop the vandalism, to stop the looting. Many businesses have now been affected by or vandalized. Last night, there were 23 businesses that were looted. And I think that if you drive through downtown LA, the graffiti is everywhere and has caused significant damages to businesses and a number of properties.
The emergency curfew went into effect Tuesday night from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., covering a roughly 1 square mile stretch of downtown. Bass says that the chaos is not a citywide crisis.
If you look at TV and you see people who are demonstrating, some inappropriately, some violently, which I believe that anybody that's involved in violence or looting or vandalism is not supporting the cause of immigrants. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing that. So the portrayal is that all of our cities are in chaos, rioting is happening everywhere, and it is a lie.
Police say no major vandalism or looting occurred overnight following a 5th day of protests. A business owner on First Street who didn't want to be identified said her shop was vandalized Monday and business has been slow since. She says the building next door was damaged with acid. Several businesses were hit with graffiti and broken windows. Cleanup crews were seen clearing the damage Wednesday. After curfew, police cited and arrested protesters who stayed behind. About 24 were taken into custody overnight. Though most demonstrators left by 8 p.m., around 150 remained. Officers used rubber bullets to disperse them. Several minors were detained near the 101 freeway around 2 a.m. and taken to a juvenile facility. 4 adults were also arrested. As for the military presence in LA, Mayor Bass says she's trying to reach President Trump.
I want him to understand the significance of what is happening here. You know, there are reports that if all of the military that have been designated to be deployed, if you add them all up, it's more military than are serving today in Iraq.
More demonstrations are expected to take place on Wednesday, and Mayor Karen Bass said the emergency curfew could last for several days. Reporting from downtown Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Elon Musk steps back from his recent feud with President Trump, saying on X that he regrets some of his posts about the president. Musk wrote on his social media platform X, quote, "I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week. They went too far." He did not say which specific posts he was talking about, though he has deleted several that were critical of Trump. One of those signaled support for impeaching the president. Musk's relationship with Trump deteriorated in public fashion last week as the two men traded jabs on social media. Musk slammed Trump's tax and domestic policy bill, labeling it disgusting abomination. In a phone conversation with the New York Post, Trump commented on Musk's apology. He said, quote, "I thought it was very nice that he did that." An appeals court today heard arguments over whether President Trump's New York criminal conviction should be moved to federal court. Here's more.
Arguments revived in President Trump's New York criminal conviction. A federal court of appeals heard oral arguments Wednesday on whether the president's appeal of his conviction should be transferred to federal court. Trump was convicted in May 2024 of 34 felony accounts of falsifying business records. The jury concluded the payments were intended to conceal an adult movie actress's allegations of an affair. Trump denies her claim and said he did nothing wrong. Some of the payments were made while he was the 45th president. Trump's attorney argued to the three-judge panel that the case should never have been tried in state court because they say some of the evidence presented to the jury involved Trump's conduct as the president. They want the Second Circuit to determine once and for all that cases against former and current presidents should be heard in federal courts. If the federal court takes control of the criminal case, it would ultimately decide Trump's appeal of the verdict, which is now pending in a state appellate court. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which prosecuted Trump's case, wants it to stay in state court. They argue that the conviction involved his personal life, not his actions as president, and that the payments at issue were private, unofficial acts unrelated to his presidential duties. If Trump loses, he could appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court.
President Trump is now reviewing the details of a trade framework between the U.S. and China as his final approval for a potential deal is still pending. And the White House issuing a stern warning as anti-ICE protests spread to other cities. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
A day after U.S. trade teams finished their talks with China in London, the White House says President Trump likes what he heard from his team and is now reviewing the framework, which includes China releasing critical minerals to the U.S.
But what the president heard, he liked. China has agreed to open their markets to the United States separately of this deal. And when it comes to this deal, we're going back to the terms that were agreed upon in Geneva for the release of some of those critical minerals and the magnets from China to the United States.
After a call between Trump and Xi Jinping and a second round of talks this week in London between China and the U.S., President Trump on Wednesday announced that a deal with China is done and subject to final approval by himself and Xi Jinping. Trump says as part of the framework discussed, China has agreed to supply the U.S. up front with full magnets and any necessary rare earths. The U.S. will provide to China what was agreed to, including student access to U.S. colleges. On tariffs, Trump says the U.S. will impose a 55% tariffs on China, while China will have a 10% tariff on the U.S.
China has a singular opportunity to stabilize its economy.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, though, today emphasizing that China needs to course correct and become a reliable partner in trade negotiations. The administration has previously accused China of repeating its history of violating trade deals, including by restricting exports of rare earth minerals to the U.S. It remains to be seen if this time around China will keep its word. Meanwhile, anti-ICE protests like those in L.A. are now spreading to major cities like New York, Chicago, Austin, and Washington, D.C. And Texas is deploying the National Guard, and more protests are planned for upcoming days. The White House today issuing a stern warning.
And let this be an unequivocal message to left-wing radicals in other parts of the country who are thinking about copycatting the violence in an effort to stop this administration's mass deportation efforts. You will not succeed. Any lawlessness will only strengthen this president's resolve to defend the majority of Americans who want to live their lives peacefully, free from the fear of violent criminal illegal aliens.
Trump has deployed hundreds of Marines and around 4,000 National Guard troops to LA. That's despite pushback from Democratic leaders. California Governor Gavin Newsom has sued the administration, accusing it of overreach, and the Chicago mayor today called Trump an authoritarian while accusing him of trying to repress all protests. The White House, though, emphasizing today that the president supports peaceful protests, just not violent ones.
The president absolutely supports peaceful protests. He supports the First Amendment. He does not support violence of any kind. He does not support assaulting law enforcement officers.
And as more protesters are planning rallies here in Washington, D.C. around this Saturday's military parade, President Trump has warned that they will be met with heavy force. Reporting from the White House, Retrial, NTD News.
In the Middle East, Israeli forces are currently reviewing details around another shooting at an aid distribution center in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, President Trump says he's getting less confident that a nuclear deal with Iran will be reached. NTD's Jason Perry has the details and a warning. This report includes content that some viewers may find disturbing.
On Wednesday, people gathered around a hospital in the Gaza Strip as patients were being brought in after another reported shooting at one of the new aid distribution centers. One man who appeared to have been shot in the leg explained what happened.
The shooting at us was unreal. We had to get down on the ground, and we started crawling. You would look at people and feel like it was all scenes from the Day of Judgment. No one was helping anyone.
Another man said this while standing next to his injured son.
He was getting flour for his children and wife so they can eat. And this happens to them? The young men and people are being slaughtered, shot at. These are death traps. This can't go on, sir.
After the shooting, Israel said they were unaware of Israeli troops shooting during daylight hours. That corresponds to footage circulated in the media. And they said that the details are under review. Israeli forces have previously accused Hamas terrorists of firing at people at aid sites, as Israel tries to get aid to the people of the Gaza Strip, but not to Hamas.
Hamas is doing his best, is almost to stop us from doing so. He is spreading rumors, fake news. He is trying bluntly and violently to stop the people of Gaza from reaching those distribution centers.
Meanwhile, Israel's chief of the general staff conducted a field tour of the northern Gaza Strip on Wednesday, and he said more troops were going to be deployed, which would ease the burden placed on reservists. Also on Wednesday, Israeli forces recovered the bodies of 2 more hostages in the Gaza Strip, making it 5 total recovered in the past week. The name of one of them has not yet been made public. And the body of a Thai hostage, which was recently recovered from the Gaza Strip, arrived in Thailand on Wednesday. His wife attended a small ceremony at an airport in Bangkok before her late husband's body was transported back to his home in northern Thailand. And in another development, President Trump said in a podcast that he is now less confident about a possible nuclear deal with Iran. Trump has previously threatened military action in Iran if a deal is not reached. Iran's defense minister said on Wednesday that if Iran is attacked, it will target all U.S. bases within its reach. And some of the U.S. bases possibly within Iran's reach are located in Kuwait, Iraq, Qatar, and more. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And today, the defense secretary confirmed that Iran's terrorist regime is actively working towards a nuclear weapon. That's according to an ex-post from Senator Tom Cotton. Cotton added, quote, "For the sake of our national security, the security of our allies, and millions of civilians in the region, this cannot be allowed to happen." Austria is dealing with the aftermath of what may be the deadliest attack in the country since the Second World War. Austria's president now says the country might need to implement stricter gun laws. NTD's international correspondent Ariane Posdar has the latest.
But all of Austria is shocked by the event of yesterday.
Austrian President Alexander Van der Bellen says the nation is still in shock on Wednesday, one day after a gunman killed 10 people. Austria is observing 3 days of national mourning, with residents holding a minute of silence in different parts of the country, including the city where the shooting took place.
I didn't plan to come here, but I couldn't stand it at home. I always ask myself how I would feel as a mom if that had happened to my son.
The assailant opened fire in his former high school in Graz, Austria's second largest city. The gunman's rampage ended after he committed suicide. but not before taking the lives of the 10 victims in the school. Austria's president now says that the country might have to change its gun laws.
If we come to the conclusion that the Austrian firearm law needs to be changed to make it safer, then we will do so.
Compared to the US, Austria already has strict gun laws, which include background checks and more. The gunman used a pistol and a shotgun. He passed the psychological tests needed to buy the pistol. A weapons expert says he's against the president's idea to change the law.
These talks should be done by people who know what they are talking about and not by politicians.
He added that changing the law might not actually make Austria safer, hinting at the fact that the gunman managed to meet the already strict requirements necessary to buy the pistol. Now, Austrian police say they were able to immediately start the investigations right after the shooting took place. And according to police, 9 of the 10 victims were students between the ages of 15 and 17, and 1 female teacher also passed away. Now, police also say that the assailant left behind a suicide note and also a pipe bomb.
There was a suicide note both in digital form via video message and in handwritten form. We were also able to find and secure a pipe bomb.
The officer added that the pipe bomb was not functional. The US Embassy in Vienna took to Twitter on Wednesday, posting this picture with the caption, "The US Embassy in Vienna's flag will fly at half-mast to remember the victims of the school shooting." Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Coming up, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testifies before Congress about trade talks with China. He says China has proven to be an unreliable partner in the past, giving the CCP another chance to change its ways. And former movie mogul Harvey Weinstein gets a split verdict today in his retrial with a conviction on one of the top charges. That and more after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testified before House lawmakers today, just hours after he returned from trade talks in London with officials of the Chinese Communist Party. He says China needs to make major changes to its economic model. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
But the country needs to be a reliable partner in trade negotiations.
Testifying before the House Ways and Means Committee on Wednesday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called the U.S.-China negotiations successful as both sides agreed to a trade framework.
If China will course correct by upholding its end of the initial trade agreement we outlined in Geneva, and I believe after our talks in London they will, then the rebalancing of the world's two largest economies is possible.
He says the U.S. is giving the CCP a chance to correct its course, and that China has one path forward. Stop what it's been doing for decades, stop overproducing goods with government subsidies, and then dumping those goods onto the world market and thereby undercutting global trade. And he says that they need to start consuming and making products for their own domestic market.
China currently has the most imbalanced economy in the history of the world. They are in the midst of a real estate downturn. Some may cause a crisis, and they are trying to export their way out of it rather than take domestic measures.
Bessent says that if the CCP keeps increasing exports in the way that it has, it will cause substantial decreases to the standard of living for Americans and those around the world. Now, some House Democrats raised concerns at this hearing that the CCP has not made good on their previous promises in trading with the U.S., and that trade deals with the communist regime going forward should be given greater oversight through Congress.
And although it committed to increasing its imports from the U.S. by $200 billion from 20 to 21, it only followed through with 58% of its promised purchases.
China has failed to meet these purchase commitments. Those were purchase commitments that were negotiated by Trump in his first administration.
They met their agreements under President Trump in 2020, and President Biden did not enforce them, and the Chinese delegation told me that they did not believe they needed to adhere to them.
I'm reclaiming my time.
Also, what came up is the danger of the U.S. relying on China for pharmaceuticals and how vulnerable the U.S. would be to relying on the CCP, its greatest adversary, for this life-saving medicine.
That actually gives them negotiating leverage. I think it would be a tragic mistake if they were ever to flip off that switch, but it's always there. They could.
Bessent also said that the Chinese regime has been an unreliable trading partner in the past, and that during this time around, the U.S. tariffs on China and other countries are meant to increase domestic manufacturing, and that will give the U.S. a better position in the event that China once again breaches its contract. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
A jury today convicted former movie mogul Harvey Weinstein on one charge in his highly publicized retrial. A second charge was tossed and a third is still pending. Here are the details.
A split verdict on Wednesday throws Harvey Weinstein's retrial into limbo. A Manhattan jury convicted the former film industry powerhouse of one of the 3 sex crimes he's been charged with. A frustrating day for the defendant as the jury tossed out a second sexual assault charge and continues to deliberate over the rape charge. They concluded that Weinstein did forcibly subject a woman to a criminal sex act in 2006. The jury deliberated for 5 days. Before the partial verdict was announced on Wednesday, the jury foreperson expressed dismay to the judge about how deliberations were going. Another juror complained on Friday about unfairness and asked to be dismissed. Weinstein himself urged the judge to stop the trial, saying, quote, "It's just not fair." The former movie mogul was initially convicted 5 years ago. At that time, he was sentenced to 23 years in a New York prison for third-degree rape and 1 count of a criminal sexual act. But that conviction was overturned last year and the case was sent back for retrial in the same Manhattan courthouse. Weinstein pleaded not guilty to all charges and denied any criminal wrongdoing. Jurors are expected to continue deliberating Thursday on the remaining charge.
Coming up, protesters facing federal charges amid the unrest in Los Angeles. Authorities say there will be more arrests in order to maintain law and order. And are there unseen forces driving the unrest in LA and beyond? The FBI is now investigating possible monetary ties and instigators linked to the riots. Joshua Phillip from the Epic Times joins us to discuss after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Department of Justice is prosecuting 2 individuals accused of possessing Molotov cocktails amid the ongoing civil unrest in Los Angeles. The U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California detailed the charges today. NTD's David Lamb has more.
Amid the unrest in Southern California, the Justice Department has charged 2 men accused of assaulting federal officers at recent rallies in the Los Angeles area.
The defendants charged in the complaints are accused of throwing Molotov cocktails at police officers and sheriff deputies who were called in to restore order after 2 demonstrations against federal immigration enforcement turned violent.
The 2 suspects in their 20s are charged with possession of an unregistered destructive device.
Today we want to highlight these specific cases because we find this particular act of violence to be extremely dangerous. As you saw in Colorado, these Molotov cocktails have the ability to seriously harm or kill a person and a police officer that they were thrown at.
Police arrested more than 20 people on the first night of a curfew in downtown Los Angeles, and the DOJ charged over 9 people over the weekend. Officers used crowd control projectiles to break up hundreds of protesters demonstrating against President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration.
We expect more charges to be filed in the coming days and weeks. If you took part in these riots and were looking to cause trouble, we will come looking for you.
Some 2,000 National Guard soldiers are in the city, and about half of them have been protecting federal buildings and agents. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
How are everyday folks viewing all the sentiment and unrest? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
What's your reaction to all of these protests that's happening across the country, especially in the wake of what happened in L.A.?
Sure, I can totally understand why they're frustrated, but I can never get behind. I'm a veteran, and I just can't get behind the violence.
Anarchy and chaos and destruction are never the way to go about
getting change and to change things are right.
Great. If agitators show up and start throwing rocks, causing trouble, obviously they're not following the law. They ought to be prosecuted. But peaceful protest is embedded in our whole country's reason for existence.
It's our right also to have opposition to certain policies, and so that's healthy debate, but it should just stay healthy.
I just feel like there should be no destruction of property, period. So just protest peacefully like our laws and Constitution call for, and let's get back to being able to have civil discourse about things.
They live in America. If they like it, act right. If they don't, need to go.
Between California and Texas, it's like a tale of two states. So Texas acted rather decisively on this, so they're now sending the National Guards. And California, as we all know, took President Trump to really ended up deploying the National Guards. So for better or for worse, what are your thoughts on the two different approaches here?
Well, I'm a lifelong Texan. My family's been in Texas for more than 200 years. I've never felt less proud of my home state.
It does seem like if people are burning and looting, that ought to be shut down. I do love the freedoms we have in Texas. Can't deny it's a great state to live in.
I would say as a Californian living in LA, I'm in support of President Trump's policies on immigration. They took it upon themselves at the state level to deal with the situation. We probably could have been a little bit more proactive.
Texas is doing the right way. I mean, they're trying to stop it before the bad stuff gets started. I mean, it's unnecessary to blow people's cars up or hurt people. There's no reason for it.
I believe that things handled immediately work out much better than if things are allowed to grow and become something that's used by media or to stage an event or to become a political thing.
FBI Director Akash Patel says the Bureau is investigating possible instigators and all monetary ties linked to the LA riots. And President Trump has suggested that professional agitators are behind the unrest. Joining us now to discuss is Joshua Phillip. He's a senior investigative reporter with the Epic Times. He's also the host of Crossroads on Epic TV. Josh, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you now. We've been covering the rioting during these protests very closely, but it looks like the violence has emerged only in certain areas. Now, you're actually on the ground there. What's the reality and scope of these demonstrations?
Well, it was absolutely violent, but you could argue that not everyone was violent. It's kind of a weird narrative going around. Any protest, any riot you're going to have, I mean, the LA riots, you could argue the majority of people were not violent. They weren't attacking police officers, but they were violent riots and did result in a lot of police officers and other people being killed or injured. So far in these riots, nobody's been killed that we know of. But it's come pretty close. You did have people throwing rocks. I mean, not even just a couple of them, large groups throwing rocks at vehicles off of the freeway overpasses, hitting cars, windshields, vehicles going 60 miles per hour. You know, a rock hitting your windshield, that speed can very easily kill you. There were police officers down on the freeways. Again, protesters throwing rocks directly at them. One officer was hit in the head. Luckily, he was wearing a helmet. It would have killed him otherwise. And of course, they continued to throw rocks even after his helmet was knocked off his head. I think it's a miracle nobody was killed with this. You had one individual just get arrested. He was accused of assault on actually attempted murder for throwing Molotov cocktails at police officers. I know they have a couple other arrests now. Another individual wanted by the FBI, actually, they have a manhunt out for him. $50,000 reward. He was accused of throwing rocks at police vehicles as they were driving by. I mean, big stones like that. You had individuals, I mean, even when I was out on the ground, throwing fireworks at police lines. I mean, this was just all across the board, all over the place. When I was out on the ground, you just heard explosion after explosion. You could see fireworks going off, like when they were, throwing at ground level. It's incredible nobody was killed, frankly.
And on that note, what have you been hearing from protesters on site or even potentially any agitators you've come across? Does anything stand out to you about these demonstrations? What are they saying?
Well, it's mixed. And I think this is where a lot of the debates get lost in the weeds. I would say the overwhelming majority of people are just normal people who are unhappy with the deportations. The overwhelming majority are probably them. You also have a large group of instigators. You do have people who are there, and I would say these are your professional protesters. These are your Antifa types, or the ones tied to various NGOs, or you have a lot of socialist and communist organizations, they even get money for this, who do this stuff, including Antifa, including, your normal college protester and so on. You had your pro-Gaza types out there. You did have NGOs present. I know Senator Josh Hawley is actually calling for investigations into at least one of those organizations that was involved, asking for their, financing, asking what they were doing to help organize and so on. And so there's a lot of that. I would say it's mixed. And so, if people try framing it one way or the other, absolutely, it's not really accurate. When I was on the ground, for example, I was there yesterday during the daytime hours. Everybody there was peaceful. I was outside the federal building. There were more journalists than protesters, at least as of yesterday afternoon. And it was mostly, there was a church group. I think they were like Episcopalians. They were protesting because they said you need to protect the children from ICE raids. That was one group. They were totally peaceful. You had another group. It was a couple guys there, father and son, holding an American flag. The guy was saying, hey, my mom was an illegal immigrant, came here when she was 15 years old. She never caused any problems. I love this country. I agree that criminals should be deported, but not everybody. And that guy was totally peaceful. No issues with him. But of course, at nighttime, then you have a very different group come out. Those are the ones I was seeing, the night before that when I was out on the streets. And they were setting cars on fire. They were doing coordinated things like that. And they were very organized. You had one group, they were standing outside. They looked like sentries. They were watching the police lines. I was not dressed in a suit, and so I think they just thought I was there like protesting. But I could hear them talking, and they were suggesting they were watching the police. Nearby, there was another group. I saw one guy with a radio in his backpack. He was communicating locations. Soon after that, a car was lit on fire in the direction he was looking at and talking to someone, talking about. And then I saw this group coordinate and go to that location. And that was, of course, outside even the main area where the protests were happening. What I get and what I've been told, you had organized groups that were trying to disperse the police. They were trying to thin the lines of police so that they could be overwhelmed. And that's why they were lighting cars on fire. It's because you have to send, of course, a fire truck. You have to send an ambulance. You have to send a protection force of police to make sure they establish a perimeter. I caught some of that on video when I ran into one of the burning vehicles. And what happens then, it disperses the police, they have less protection, and then they get overwhelmed and pushed out by the crowd, which was also part of the reason why Trump ended up, deploying the National Guard, was to bolster the police force so that they wouldn't be dispersed like that.
Expanding on that, there are growing reports of a CCP connection here. What can you tell us about any CCP influence you're seeing in connection to the riots or protests?
Well, I know that's under investigation right now. FBI Director Kash Patel did announce, in fact, Epic Time had the exclusives on it. He did announce that they're going to be investigating the financial channels. I can tell you Senator Josh Hawley, he had a public statement saying they're investigating financial channels right now. The organization they're going after it, I don't know if it's the one that was named. I don't know if that one has any ties to the CCP. But the other issue is there's an entire nexus of grassroots, mostly communist and socialist organizations that do have some ties to the Chinese Communist Party. When it comes to Black Lives Matter, it's the same thing. You could argue most of them are grassroots, not tied into the stuff. But there are organizations tied in with it that do have ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Same thing with the pro-Gaza protests. A lot of that was tied in with the Tides Foundation, other similar organizations. And again, groups like, Liberation, Socialists, and so on, that have ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Many people have been pointing to one individual married, actually, I believe the husband of the leader of Code Pink, who lives in Shanghai. And again, a key figure with all this. Many people suspect that also ties in with maybe, again, he lives in Shanghai, based in Shanghai, so they're wondering if that represents some kind of CCP tie. Again, this needs to be investigated. It's never been properly investigated, but there has been evidence in the past of many of these exact same organizations having ties to the CCP, and it's those exact organizations that tend to be the violent ones. They tend to be the instigators. They tend to be the ones lighting cars on fire, and acting as kind of the real, boots on the ground, doing the worst of the worst. And then, of course, I should note, you have a lot of opportunists. And I believe a lot of the looting, I believe a lot of the looting is just opportunists.
A lot to unfold here for sure. Joshua Phillip, as always, thank you so much for joining us. As the LA riots spark protests across the country, Texas Governor Greg Abbott deploys the National Guard in his state. This as California Governor Gavin Newsom blames President Trump for sending the National Guard to his state. What is the message both governors are sending? Your analysis and insights from Bill O'Reilly. Stay tuned for NTD's Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up in the NBA, it's Game 3 of the finals tonight between Indiana and Oklahoma City. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. For your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, but let's start in the NBA as tonight we'll have it Game 3 of the finals. Now, yesterday we discussed how Pacers guard Tyrese Halliburton might not be 100% healthy. Any update today?
Not much of an update. I'm sure the guy is just going to end up toughing it out. I mean, no player wants to miss a finals game. Now, according to his head coach, Rick Carlisle, he was not limited at practice yesterday. Now, of course, one thing about the finals schedule, there's been 2 days off in between every game so far this season, in the finals anyway. That's different from the regular season where plenty of times you'll have back-to-back games. And of course, that final schedule is going to change a little bit because there's only going to be 1 day off between games 3 and 4. But a minor injury like whatever he might be going through is certainly easier to manage with this final schedule. Of course, Halliburton, very critical to the Pacers. Now, he leads them in minutes played, he leads them in assists, he's second in points, and obviously he knows how to hit those clutch shots. Now, all that said, Oklahoma City is still 5.5-point favorites tonight, despite the game being played in Indianapolis. That game is going to be starting at 8:30 Eastern Time tonight, with the series tied at 1 game apiece.
Well, looking at golf news, the first round of the U.S. Open begins tomorrow. Who are some of the favorites here?
Yeah, the main betting favorite here is #1 ranked Scottie Scheffler, at least betting-wise. Now, according to ESPN Bet, he's a plus 275 to win. That's actually the highest odds for any favorite for a major tournament since 2009, when Tiger Woods was higher than that, actually, for all 4 majors. Of course, that was when Woods was back in his ridiculous prime. Now, Scheffler is really on a roll right now. He's won 3 of the last 4 events he's been in, including last month's PGA Championship. Now, he was asked about being a favorite earlier this week, just yesterday. Let's listen to his response here.
I think everybody hears from fans, whether they have a financial benefit or anything in their outcome. That's why I had to get rid of my Venmo, because I was either getting paid by people or people were requesting me a bunch of money when I didn't win. It wasn't a good feeling. But no, I don't pay attention to the favorite stuff or anything like that. I mean, starting Thursday morning, we're at even par, and it's up to me to go out there and play against a golf course and see what I can do. Oh, I don't remember the most that somebody would send me, maybe a couple bucks here or there. That didn't happen nearly as much as the request did.
Yeah, poor Scheffler there in his Venmo account. But anyway, the U.S. Open is going to start tomorrow. It'll be at Oakmont Country Club in Pennsylvania. Now, this is known to actually be a very difficult course. This is actually the most popular course that the U.S. Open has chosen to play on. But at no point has a golfer ever gotten a better score than 5 under par for the tournament. So a very challenging course there for Scottie Scheffler. Hopefully he doesn't get too much problems with his Venmo going after this.
Yes, he's putting that on a private. Well, moving to NHL news, Colorado Avalanche defenseman Cale Makar won the Norris Trophy as the league's top defenseman.
Yeah, Makar, probably not a surprise pick. Now, he led all defensemen 30 goals as well as 62 assists, and of course then 92 points. He was the overwhelming favorite for this award, with getting 176 of the 191 votes. Now, this is the second Norris Trophy award win that he's gotten in his career. He also won in 2022 when he helped lead Colorado to the Stanley Cup title. Now, he's just 26 years old now. That actually makes him just the 6th player to win multiple Norris Trophy awards before turning 27 years old. So congratulations to Cale Carr.
Yes, we're all too old to win anything now. Shifting gears to baseball, Dodgers two-way star Shohei Ohtani threw 3 simulated innings yesterday as he continues to rehab his elbow. Have they set a date for when he'll actually pitch in the game?
Yeah, they still have not set this date. Now, Dodgers manager Dave Roberts was asked yesterday whether there was a chance that Ohtani could pitch before the All-Star break next month. Roberts said there was a, quote, north of 0 chance that this could happen. So slight chance anyway. Now, Ohtani has not pitched since August of 2023. That was when he was still with the LA Angels. He's been recovering from elbow ligament surgery ever since. But of course, when he did pitch, he was a very good one. When he finished 4th in the AL Cy Young voting in 2022. And he was an all-star both as a hitter and a pitcher twice before. So definitely something some of the Dodgers could use, and they could definitely use him right now. Right now, 3 of their starters are on the injured list. You've got Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, and Roki Sasaki. So the Dodgers certainly could use a starter there. Anyway, Ohtani, though, we'll have to see if he comes before the All-Star break. It sounds like probably not happening, no matter how desperate the Dodgers get. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that, should it happen.
We'll see if his Venmo is also getting a bunch of requests. Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
Brian Wilson, co-founder of the Beach Boys, has died at the age of 82. The music icon's family announced his death today. Here's a look back at his life.
He was the mastermind behind the Beach Boys' chart-topping success. Brian Wilson was one of the most influential composers in modern music. The Beach Boys' joyful pop emerged at the vanguard of the California sound in the early 60s. It was Wilson's creative genius that layered the band's 5 distinct voices into one perfect harmony.
I would just describe it as ethereal and masculine and feminine put together.
Wilson and the other Beach Boys rode their signature sound wave through a string of hits. Surfin' USA, I Get Around, Fun, 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 and Help Me Rhonda. By the mid-60s, Wilson experimented with new music and with drugs. He said an LSD experience helped him write the Beach Boys' 1966 magnum opus, Pet Sounds. Pet Sounds is widely considered one of the greatest albums of all time. During its studio sessions, the Beach Boys recorded Good Vibrations, later released as a single. It became one of the most influential tracks in rock history.
The night we cut the vocals at RCA was one of the highlights of my life, teaching the guys the parts, and it was just a departure from anything we'd ever done before. It was probably our masterpiece.
For 7 months, Wilson experimented with multiple layers of track, echoes, and reverb, using the studio as his instrument. Good Vibrations, produced at a cost of more than $400,000 in today's dollars, was dubbed a pocket symphony. But the drug-fueled creative blaze came at a cost. Wilson said he began hearing voices around the time he used LSD. By the 70s, his life had spiraled into an abyss of drug abuse, depression, and seclusion. He disappeared from public view and fell under the sway of discredited psychologist Eugene Landy. The 2015 biopic Love and Mercy dramatized Wilson's decline, his struggles with Landy, and his redemption with the help of second wife Melinda. Wilson returned to the studio in the late 80s. He released over a dozen solo albums in the decades that followed.
And this weekend, a celebration of the Army's 250th birthday in our nation's capital. Tune in for our live special coverage of all the festivities this Saturday, June 14th, starting at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on NTD. And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.